Heyo everyone, Zion over here from Nintendo Life. So recently, Capcom held a fairly lengthy, I mean, I guess it wasn't the longest, but they held a pretty long Dragon's Dogma presentation. In that presentation, they announced that Dragon's Dogma 2 is in development. So to talk all about that and just the original Dragon's Dogma, I'm joined by Kate Gray.
That's me. I was expecting you to give me like a weird nickname like Alex always does. It's nice to hear my own name.
Yeah, just normal.
My real name.
Not Mr. Kate or
No.
I don't know what else you get actually, but something.
It's usually just Mr. Kate, isn't it? Strange boy. Now it sounds like I'm just bad-mouthing Alex while he's not here to defend himself.
It's fun though. I do like it. I like that he's so quick on the fly with things like that. And I mean, we all can be, right? But today I was not. I just gave your normal name. So Dragon's Dogma has been announced, or the second one, right?
Yes.
But it has not been confirmed for Switch at the moment. But that's because no platforms have been confirmed. Is that correct?
Yeah, they basically were just like, here's the title, here's the logo, which is I feel like that's becoming more of a thing in games where they're just like, you get the tiniest amount of information to sustain you for the next year or two. And you know what? I'm kind of fine with it. Dragon Age has also been doing that. They're like, oh, you know what? We've decided to call it Dreadwolf. And I'm like, yes! Delicious morsels of information. Thank you very much, Papa BioWare.
I will think about this for the next 6 months.
Yeah, what does it mean? Like, I love dissecting a Zelda trailer, but I also kind of love literally just getting a logo and nothing else.
I feel like I should have said this earlier, but I didn't, and here we are.
Mm-hmm.
I have never played a Dragon's Dogma game, and I know you know that. You knew that before we went into this conversation, but now the very kind listeners and viewers have just have heard my my shame. But you played the first one.
I finished it recently, yeah, because the 10th anniversary was quite recent, and so I wanted to write something about it, but realized I hadn't finished the game, so I hopped back in. It turned out that I was maybe 10 minutes away from the end of the game the last time that I stopped playing it. So I just like polished it off and I was like, all right, there we go. Now I've finished Dragon's Dogma. So yeah, that was like a couple of weeks ago maybe. So it's quite fresh in my mind.
I'm glad you did that. I feel like it's very easy to like have that happen with a game and then be like, I don't remember anything, so I'm not gonna finish it, or I'll restart it someday. But you did.
Thank you. It's because well, I don't want to spoil it too much, but basically there's a part in the game where you're sort of like, oh, I think I know how this is gonna end. I think I know what's gonna happen next, and then it does something completely different. And it was just after that point where I was like, whoa, I thought I'd nearly finished the game, but I hadn't. But it turned out I also had nearly finished the game. It's just that there was more stuff than I anticipated.
Okay.
So it was okay in the end.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you found it worthwhile to go back and play it too. So yeah. I know I told you this beforehand, before we started recording, but I'm gonna say it again now because I think it's gonna make some people laugh, maybe offend some people as well.
Okay.
I've always looked at Dragon's Dogma as like a third-person Skyrim, because they kind of came out around the same time, and like visually that was what the graphics both reminded me of, and turns out it makes more sense because like I found out in that presentation, which even if you're not a Dragon's Dogma fan, I highly recommend anyone listening should go watch that presentation, because it's almost like a documentary where they go through kind of the like how Dragon's Dogma was made, or at least they retell kind of some of the story with some of like the lead creators, and that was really special. But I didn't know it was influenced by like Dungeons and Dragons so much, and that makes so much sense like visually from what I could see now. But
yeah, I mean, I think Skyrim sort of ended up cornering the market on fantasy RPGs, even though I don't think Elder Scrolls was like the first fantasy RPG, you know?
Sure.
But now if you make a fantasy RPG, it's always going to have elements of Skyrim in it, because it was very influential. It was very formative in the fantasy RPG genre. There we go. And I think, yeah, Dragon's Dogma, it has a lot in common with Skyrim because they have a lot in common with Dungeons and Dragons, which is kind of like the genesis of a lot of stuff that fantasy RPGs do. I didn't know that it specifically was inspired by Dungeons and Dragons, but I can see that because it's very much about a party. Like, Skyrim is about you and occasionally someone that carries your stuff, but you don't really need them. Like, they're not
Sure.
really there to help you. They're there to carry all the heavy things. You just dump all your wheels of cheese on them. Whereas Dragon's Dogma, I think it has this reputation, and I felt this way as well before I played it, that it's just a sort of generic, janky RPG. And it is, but it's also not. And it's very focused around the party aspect of it. You know, it's a 4-player game that is a single-player game. And it's around these like pawns. So they're basically NPCs. They're basically like, you know, when you do like an escort mission, it's that, but it's more interesting than that at the same time. Like, it's better than the way Fallout does it, the way Skyrim does it. And that's really what sets it apart.
I was hearing that like you can like customize them and that like I know they were talking about this in the presentation too, that like sometimes the pawns might not do like exactly what you want, but they were trying to design them not to be the best, like the most efficient players in the game, but they were trying to make them feel like humans. So they wanted these pawns to like make mistakes and then the more you spend time with them, the more you know, like grow like fond of them, and that could just be like an excuse almost for like some bad programming. I'm not sure, but I found that really endearing, and yeah, I was curious to learn more about that aspect. So like, do you kind of pick up pawns like as you roam around the game and can like swap them in and out, or do you kind of like gather a few at the early portion of the game and then do you stick with them throughout the journey? Like, kind of how does that work out?
So I'll tell you what it's like. The way that the pawn system works is somewhere in between Fable 2. Have you played Fable 2?
Fable 1. My mom played Fable 2, but I'm not her, so I guess that doesn't count.
I've not played Fable 1.
Oh, look at us.
So Fable 2 is like a very sort of lighthearted, silly RPG with very serious parts of it. And you can at any point pick a random person that you meet and be like, do you want to get married? And then you just like fart in front of them until they love you. It's very stupid. But then you can get very attached to that NPC. Like, you can elevate any NPC to being an important character just by being like, I like you. So Dragon's Dogma has a bit of that, but the other bit that it has from another game is that it's a little bit like Pokemon. You know, when you start Pokemon, you pick a starter Pokemon, and you can keep that starter Pokemon for the rest of your playtime. Or you can get rid of it and go for like actual competitive Pokemon, right? Like, if you want to actually be good at Pokemon, you might not go with your starter Pokemon. You might have a team full of different guys.
Sure.
But most people who play Pokemon end up keeping their starter Pokemon because they get so attached to it, and also because it's the highest level of all of their Pokemon. And that's kind of how Dragon's Dogma works. You create your own pawn at the start of the game. Mine was called Grocko. He was a tiny little boy with a very, very high-pitched voice, like helium high-pitched voice.
Wow.
And he was so good at everything because, like, I paid so much attention to, like, raising him right. So he'd be like, did you like that, master? And I'd be like, no, next time do it like this. And he'd be like, yes, master, taking notes, master. And I'm like, oh, he's such a cute little boy.
And they actually speak, too. It's not just, like, grunts and then, like, dialogue on screen.
Yep, they speak a lot. It's kind of one of the problems and also best parts of the game.
Okay.
Like, when you're in combat, they'll be like, master, behind you! Or like, I'm going to kill them with fire, master! And they'll just keep talking. And at some point, you're like, can you shut up and focus on, like, just hitting them, please?
They attack in quick succession! We have triumphed. There, master! Those monsters are risen. Ready yourself!
This must be how my partner feels about like me when I get done with work. I'm like cleaning the house and I'm just like, Fallon, guess what I did today?
Yeah, it's a bit like that. You end up with your pawn, who you have basically raised to be exactly how you want him. And then two that you pick from the internet, but I think it's called like the Rift.
Okay.
So you go into this thing called the Rift, and there are all these like weird NPCs just walking around, kind of like ghosts. And you can go up to them and be like, what's your deal? And they'll be like, I'm really good with a bow, and I have completed these quests. So if you need to go on these quests, I know how to do it. That's one of the other things that they can do, is that like Yeah, you can upload your porn to the internet, and then it knows how to do the quests you've already done, so it can help, which is really cool.
I know they were talking about like the trading aspect of
Yeah.
pawns. Is that kind of how that comes into play? Like you can't like hit up someone and be like, hey, do you want to take my boy off my hands? It's not like that. You just kind of copying them almost, or
yeah, it's a copy. You're like, oh, I love Grocko. I'm gonna upload him to the internet, and other people can download him, like that one episode of Futurama where they download Lucy Liu. I'm sorry, so many references today.
No, keep them coming.
But they won't steal the guy. They'll just have a copy. You also equip them with armor, and the person that like downloads your porn will like be unable to change the armor without also giving you the armor. It's a little confusing. So basically the idea is you keep them in the armor they came with.
Okay.
So you can dress them up like a little clown, and you'll be like, this is what he looks like. This is my boy. He's a clown. Deal with it.
Have you done this? Did you do that?
No, but there are a lot like that. Like one of the pawns I had downloaded, who actually really sucked. Like, I'm sorry if this is your pawn, but he sucked. His name was Geralt, and he looked like Geralt from The Witcher. And then my other one was called Alice, and she was just wearing, like bikini armor. She was just wearing bikini armor, and I was like, yeah, sure, okay. She's great though. She's very competent.
This
Geralt
sucks. This sounds like the Me Like Maker incident, just like all over again. Like people just making the most ridiculous things they could. Like Mom, look, I made Geralt from The Witcher in Dragon's Dogma. Jimmy, go to bed.
Yeah, it doesn't get as silly as like the Miiverse, where people are like, look, it's Snoopy. Look, it's the Cookie Monster. Like, the character creator is not that wild. But you definitely do get like any human character you can probably download from the Rift, but I think you have to put in like specific codes or something to find them. So usually I just pick from the random ones that are like roughly around the right level, that it just like dumps into the Rift, and it's like, choose from one of these. Much easier that way.
It's like a booster pack, but there's a human inside.
Yeah, basically. Or you can go to like because you can rank them. So you can say like, oh, this one, 5 stars, very good, would pawn again. And then you can look at like the highest ranked ones and just download those if you want, which is just cheating really, but it's fine.
So you kind of mentioned too that Dragon's Dogma had some, it's janky in some places. And I can only speak from what I've heard from you and from other people. So with Dragon's Dogma 2 coming out at some point, there being like such a big gap between those two, do you have like any like hopes and dreams, or maybe even like worries about them, spending too much time on it and like kind of filtering out some of that jank? Like would the game be lost without that silliness? I realize it was kind of a big question, but
well, I think I have similar feelings again about the new Fable remake sequel. I don't even really know what it is, that's in the works at, I think, Playground Games, where I'm like, well, you don't have Peter Molyneux, and I can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, is it going to be the same? Isn't going to have that weird, irreverent humor that the first 3 games had? And I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. Probably. I mean, it would be weird to make a Fable sequel that wasn't anything like Fable. And I feel very similarly about Dragon's Dogma. It is lovable jank in the same way that like Skyrim is fun, because you can put a bucket on someone's head and then steal all their stuff. And the way the game engine works, it's like, yeah, well, they can't see, so they don't see you do any of that. And you're like, that's so cool. But like, they didn't build the game with that in mind. And I think part of Dragon's Dogma being so like such a lovely experience is the stories that you make with the pawn system. Like, it's set up just so like stupid stuff can happen all the time. Like, you'll be fighting a pack of wolves and your pawn will be standing there going, I hear wolves arisen. And you're like, yeah, me too. I also see them and they are biting me. So like, yeah, I figured that one out. Thank you.
And they're biting you.
And like, I know that technically that is jank, and a game that is like, in quotes, made well wouldn't be doing that. But that's what I like about Dragon's Dogma. I like it being really goofy and silly. I like being like wearing a pink gown everywhere. And I don't know how much of like the lovability of Dragon's Dogma is down to its jank and how much of it is like on purpose, you know? I can imagine it being like glossy and looking a lot like Elden Ring, and like that's not really why I like Dragon's Dogma. I think the combat actually is one of the best things because it's a bit like Monster Hunter. You know, with Monster Hunter you can like climb on a dragon's back and chop its tail off. It's got that. You can like climb on things and cut parts of them off.
And I noticed they put like a really big focus into talking about that in the presentation. Is that
Really?
fun? Is that a good element of the game? Because it does seem like that they'll lean into that in the second one, I'm assuming, based on how much they talked about it. But
I mean, it is a really unique part of Dragon's Dogma, even though I said that it's a lot like Monster Hunter. Like, it's kind of weird to me that in the Souls games, you're fighting this, like, gigantic mountain of a beast, but you can only hit its legs because it's taller than you, and, like, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
Whereas in Dragon's Dogma, you can jump onto the back of someone. Maybe a bit more like Shadow of the Colossus, like
Sure.
you climb up something. And, like, again, it's really janky, so it's a little bit hard to tell what's going on sometimes, but there's this one enemy that I think is a manticore. So it's got like the head of a lion and the tail of a snake, and then just a goat in the mid, like a goat's head coming out of its back. Because I guess that's a manticore. And you can kill any one of its heads first, and the other two will keep fighting. Which is so
weird.
cool, because like the lion is biting you, the goat is like ramming you, and the snake is throwing poison at you. So you can take different approaches based on which attack is doing more damage to you. That's really cool.
So with this being Capcom, we know that they seem to like Nintendo these days. You know, Monster Hunter Rise came to Switch and it's on PC, but it's like console specific wise, it's on Switch. Now I feel like it would be wishful thinking to hope that Dragon's Dogma 2 would be a console exclusive for Switch, but do you do you think it's fair to hope that they would bring it over to Switch with the fact that, you know, Dark Arisen is on Switch? And
There's a certain caliber of game where I'm like never really sure if it's gonna make it to Switch. Like, to bring up Dragon Age again, Dragon Age, why isn't Dragon Age on Switch? If The Witcher can run on Switch, like, I know that's a lot of work, but that sort of seems like a really good candidate for the kind of games that people like to play on Switch. Resident Evil, like the latest one, again, probably a little intense for the Switch, but maybe not. Who knows? Again,
Sure.
The Witcher, it's a big game. Very, very graphically intensive. And like, while Capcom has put a lot of stuff on Switch, you know, like Ace Attorney and Monster Hunter and some other ones probably, I'm not thinking of immediately, and Dragon's Dogma as well, of course. They clearly have a really great relationship with Nintendo. Like, they're some of Nintendo's best-selling games. And just best games, like Ace Attorney. It's great. Everyone should play it. But when it comes to Dragon's Dogma 2, when the year is like 2022, 2023, whenever it's coming out, it might just be too much for the Switch. But the first one is good, so maybe if they use the same engine, I don't know. I don't know anything about what it's like to make Dragon's Dogma.
Same.
Yeah. So, like, it could go either way, is my point.
You bring up a good point, though, too, that if, you know, by the time Dragon's Dogma 2 comes out, maybe we will finally have a better Nintendo Switch. So my partner and I just bought an Xbox Series X recently, by the way, as well. Because you have one, too. Didn't you just get one a few months ago or something, too, was it? Or
I have two, technically. We had a lot of issues with them shipping them, and then we ended up with two, which I don't know what we're gonna do with the second one.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so we just got one recently, and I've I've also been playing Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS4 on the PS4 Pro, and we've been playing some Halo Infinite, but it makes me like when I go back to the Switch to play something that could be running better on other hardware. We are kind of getting to the point now where, pixel art games and more minimalist stuff, or even just something with like a really striking art style. It runs well on the standard Switch, but I do think we are getting to the point where it would be nice to see some better hardware. So maybe what I was trying to say was maybe it's not the worst thing or not the dumbest thing to think that maybe we will get a Switch Pro or a Switch 2 someday, and then Dragon's Dogma 2 will come to that.
Yeah. We don't have a release date for Dragon's Dogma 2, as far as I can tell. I think it was literally just, it's going to be called Dragon's Dogma 2, and it exists.
Yeah, there was like the big shot of them like ripping their jackets off, and like the zipper sounds of the hoodies or whatever, and then there's the shirt. Bam! Sorry, I spoiled the presentation.
It's okay. We'll probably have footage right here.
True,
showing that bit. I mean, the thing is that I usually feel, because this isn't the first time this has happened where they're like, here's the logo. I usually feel like that's a sign that there's not a lot happening.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
It's been 10 years since Dragon's Dogma. They've had 10 years to make a sequel. I mean, it's Capcom, so they were busy on other stuff. I'm going to look up what the director was doing in the meantime. He worked on Devil May Cry 4 and 5. So, sure, he's been busy. And Devil May Cry 5 was 2019. So, still, that's 3 years that he's presumably just been twiddling his thumbs. So...
Well, yeah, I guess...
What does that mean?
Maybe he has just been working on the game the whole time?
Yeah.
I just took a look at the Dragon's Dogma website for fun and saw that the game's being developed with the RE engine, which I suppose... At first I was like, oh, that's amazing, because that's what Monster Hunter Rise was developed with for Switch. And so, that gave me some hope. But then I looked and saw that basically everything Capcom has developed for the past few years has used the RE engine. So, that doesn't really mean anything necessarily. But another thing, though, is that next year, Capcom's slated to be releasing Resident Evil 4, the remake, Exo Primal, Pragmata, and Street Fighter 6. All of those are slated for next year. So maybe Dragon's Dogma 2 will be a 2024 game. And maybe that's why we've, kind of like you said, why we've seen absolutely nothing about it. And it wouldn't, even if the developer's been, from what we know, twiddling their thumbs for the past 3 years, or the director, maybe he has been working on it in secret for the past 3, and maybe it'll be a 5-year development cycle if it's a massive RPG, to them.
I would not complain. I think they had a big year last year as well, just releasing a billion things at once.
Yeah, you're right.
Like Monster Hunter and Ace Attorney came out, I think, pretty soon after one another. So
that's right. Yeah.
It's not unprecedented.
Yeah, I completely forgot about Ace Attorney because it didn't get made with the RE engine. Believe it or not.
No, probably not. No.
Could you imagine a first-person Ace Attorney with the RE engine?
I bet someone's made that first-person Ace Attorney.
Oh man, in VR, Nintendo Labo VR exclusive. Oh boy, can we April Fool's joke that next year? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
Spoilers.
Well, I guess, did you have anything else you wanted to throw out about Dragon's Dogma 2 for the lovely audience that has made it all the way to the end of this discussion?
I do have one thing to say, and that is that I really think everyone should give Dragon's Dogma a go. You don't have to play it on Switch. You can play it on PC. That's where I played it. It's fine. It all counts.
Yeah.
Give it a go. Push past the first few hours that are they feel generic and they feel like an uninteresting RPG, and just really wait until you get to, I think it's called Grand Soren, which is the first big area, and it'll start really opening up and really get into the meat of the mechanics, because it is this very weird game if you let it be. If you just play it like a Skyrim, you probably won't have as much fun. So everyone should play it.
So take your shoes off, kick back, and just enjoy the weirdness.
Yeah.
The silly
and make
moments.
your porn really stupid. Just lean
That
all
helps.
the way into it, because it's very entertaining.
Well, and last I checked too, by the time this video goes out, it might not be on sale anymore, but it was on sale in the eShop in the US for $10. So maybe if you're lucky and you go take a peek, maybe it'll be super cheap.
I think Capcom games go on sale a lot, so, just put it on your wish list and wait.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, just wait it out. You'll get it. You'll get a deal. I hope you've already done this by now, but if you haven't, let us know your favorite parts about Dragon's Dogma. Let us know your views if you always looked at it as this Skyrim competitor as well, like I did back in the day. but especially let us know if you've put time into Dragon's Dogma and had a good time. Let us know why other people should play it. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this, then why don't you go and invite that subscribe button to be your pawn, and then give it a silly voice, a funny name, and then upload it to the internet so that way other people can also enjoy the fun of your pawn. And then ring the notification bell, because the pawn loves that. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Kate, for joining me for this chat. Stay safe out there, and we will see you all next time.
Wolves hunt in packs. That's what he sounds like, I promise.